Well, thank you very, very much for inviting me. This is a great day. Started out great. Got Wordle on 3, Foodle on 4. Not too bad. But you know what was really neat is you got to maintain a little sense of humor. I have a friend of mine who is a retired professional bike rider. And some years ago, I sent him a picture of a huge turtle that was on the bike trail in Maryland. It was a day when I was in DC and I was going for a bike ride, and I sent this picture. So ever since then, we send each other pictures of things that we see on the bike trail. Yesterday, he sent me a picture of a deer. So today, on the way here, I stopped and took a picture, and then I texted him and I said, I saw some naked ladies on my ride today. Picture to follow. So again, thank you very, very much. I'm glad to be back today. And I thought what I'd do is just talk a little bit about what's been going on in Washington, what I'm working on, and then just open it up for questions. And I don't think you can start in today's public sector world without talking about some pretty incredible successes that the Congress has been able to achieve. You start with the American Rescue Plan, dealing head on with COVID, getting shots in people's arms, getting the schools cleaned up and ready to take the students back, keep the economy going, keeping small businesses open. The infrastructure bill that Congress passed, $1.2 trillion investment on U.S. infrastructure. We have not had that type of investment in infrastructure since Eisenhower was the president. And we've been going for the last 4 or 5 years, we've been having under what President Biden calls the last guy, every week we'd have an infrastructure week. We're going to do infrastructure this week. We didn't do anything on infrastructure. And what we did now, $1.2 trillion. It's money for roads, bridges, highways, all the old traditional infrastructure stuff, airports and ports, but even more than that, expansion of broadband, which is going to be incredibly important. Resilience, construction that's resilient. The work that's done on the ports, we all are painfully aware of the supply shortages that we experienced. And it was particularly hard for our area because we were impacted by the port of Oakland, which is so far in the past. Ships were lined up for days to try and get in. When things got unloaded, they got stuck, couldn't even get to the people that ordered the things that they needed. And it finally got to the point where ships wouldn't even come to the port of Oakland to pick things up. They'd go to Long Beach and turn around and go back empty rather than dealing with that. So an investment in the ports is incredibly important. The CHIPS Act, to bring chip manufacturing back to the United States. There was a time where we made about 36% of all of the computer chips that we needed. When we ran into the supply chain problems, we were at 12% of the chips that we need were being manufactured here. So this is a huge investment that is very, very important. And then the Inflation Reduction Act, which is going to put money in people's pockets. Someone contacted me this morning and said, my medical bills are already putting money in my pocket because of the cost of insulin, capping it at 35% and a $2,000 annual cap, out-of-pocket cap for pharmaceuticals. And the fact that we can now negotiate pharmaceuticals is going to make drug prices much, much lower. I have a very personal connection to the Inflation Reduction Act because it was the biggest investment in climate change legislation in our history. And the part on the climate change was legislation of mine, the Green Act, which uses the tax code to encourage people to move towards renewable energy. That's going to mean cheaper prices, it's going to be more jobs, and it's going to get us to our goal of dealing with climate change a lot quicker than we otherwise would have. I believe climate change is the biggest issue that we face as a people. If we get everything else right and we mess it up with climate change, it's all for naught. And I think you all know that. So this was an incredible investment. I think everybody knows that I've been the lead person in Congress on gun violence prevention. And in the last Congress, we passed gun violence prevention legislation, the first in about 30 years to pass the Congress and be signed into law. And it's a measure that, although not enough, it's a measure that will help a great deal. And it did everything from investment in mental health, investment in community safety, to if it did nothing else than close what we've always referred to as the boyfriend loophole, it would have been a success. And what that means is that the law used to say that if you are married to someone and you abuse your spouse, you're prohibited from owning a firearm. But if you live with someone and you're not married, you're an unmarried couple, and you abuse your partner, no problem, go buy a gun. And it's been referred to as the boyfriend loophole. And it has been so divisive in Congress that over the course of the Violence Against Women's Act lifetime, we've tried to reauthorize that bill and tried to include that in the reauthorization. And the folks on the other side of the aisle stopped the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women's Act. And in this bill, we closed that loophole. So that's a pretty big deal. I'll tell you then, now fast forward in this Congress, it's been an all-out effort to save the things that we've done. The new majority in the House is trying to overturn all of those gains that we made. So that's certainly a priority. But I have priorities of my own. And as your member of Congress, I thought I'd share some of those with you, some of the things that I'm currently working on in this Congress. Number one priority is tax relief for fire victims. Now, I don't have to talk to anybody here to remind you that we were the victims of fire and how disruptive it can be in your life. But we've had people in our district and throughout California that lost their lives, lost their homes, and lost their businesses. A number of those individuals worked as a group, and they were part of the PG&E trust fund that compensated them for their loss. Now, a couple problems with that. One, it wasn't enough compensation. So the people that settled with PG&E, they didn't get enough to make themselves whole, which I think is bad. Worse than that, they have to pay taxes on the money that they got. Imagine that. You lose everything you own. You get a settlement from the people who were found to be responsible. Then you have to pay taxes on that, and it's not even enough to build back your home. And then worse than that, they have to pay taxes on the lawyer fees, the lawyers that did this settlement. So in the last Congress, I was able to get legislation of mine passed through the House, over to the Senate, and part of the 11th hour negotiation to fund the government. And in the last minute, as you probably read, Mitch McConnell said, we're doing no tax provisions in this omnibus legislation. So it perished there. We've reintroduced that bill, and this is my top priority this year. I continue to work on gun violence prevention. I chair the Gun Violence Prevention Task Force. There are a number of things that we're working on, everything from safe storage to enhanced background checks, to including background checks for everyone who purchases a firearm. It's the number one quickest, best way to deal with gun violence. And interestingly, it's supported by about 92% of the American people. The only place that expanding background checks is partisan or divisive, you guessed it, it's in the halls of Congress. And we aren't able in this new majority to get that bill up for a vote to keep hammering away and trying to make that happen. I believe the second biggest issue that we face as a people is mental health. You think about it, I don't believe there's a problem or an issue that we face today that doesn't have some tie to mental illness. And forever, we have dealt with the symptoms of mental illness, putting Band-Aids on problems. There's not enough money to do that. There never will be enough money to do that, nor do I believe that solves the problem. I think we have to get ahead of the curve. We need to increase our research on the brain, figuring out why these things happen, how we can prevent them from happening. And I think that's the only way we're going to get ahead of the curve. You can look at homelessness. And I know a lot of folks say, well, there's people that don't want to work and they're addicted. And a lot of that's probably true. There's a big portion of the homeless population is addicted. But when you have mental health problems and you don't get the help you need, you self-medicate. And it's pretty well researched and established that that's a big part of that population. And it goes on and on and on. Child abuse, spousal abuse. Nobody here is more than a degree or two away from a mental health issue. Ourselves, our friends, our families, our neighbors, and we need to be able to deal with this. So that becomes, that is a top priority of mine, and I have legislation that would be able to increase the amount of dollars that goes into research for mental health. And I bet there's some things that I forgot. Oh yeah. Right now, I go back to Washington on Tuesday, and the big priority is to fund the government. I think we have like 9 days, 9 working days in Congress to pass a budget, or everything closes down. And we know how productive government shutdowns are. You know, even when they end, you start right back where you started. How do you fund it? So that's a non-starter for me, and I really want to make sure that I do everything I can to ensure that we fund the government. And then also a top priority, and it should be a top concern for everybody, and that's protecting our democracy. The idea that someone can start an insurrection to overthrow the government, to overturn the vote of the American people, is something that should scare the bejesus out of all of us. And we need to make sure that is a non-starter. So those are kind of my priorities. I've got some earmarks. We brought earmarks back. Remember earmarks? That's where members of Congress get to earmark things in the budget to go to their district. For a while, earmark became a 4-letter word. I've never believed that. I've always thought that was the most appropriate thing to do. No 20-year-old staffer in the administration knows more about what we need in our district than I do. And I think it's important to be able to earmark those priorities to get the funding to our districts that we need. And we brought those back. They were gone for a while. We brought them back, and I've had a couple of successful goes at it. This year it's a little bit different. The new majority has cut the amount of earmarks that we can request dollar-wise, which I don't understand. It's not a budget saver. It's not a tax dollar saver. The money's already budgeted. We're just, with an earmark, you just say, out of the transportation fund, this money goes to fixing the road in front of Oakmont, something along those lines. So they're not saving any money. I think it's just a talking point for them when they go home, that they were able to reduce the amount of funding. So we've got earmarks that are alive and well. If we do get the government funded, there'll be monies coming back to Sonoma County and the other counties in our district. And there are 5 counties in our district. There's Sonoma, Lake, Napa, Solano, and Yolo County. That's the boundaries of the 4th Congressional District. And I'm honored to be the representative for all of you and for the folks in those other 4 counties. I'm glad to be here, and I'll open it up for questions. And I have Rebecca Hermosillo, my aide in Sonoma County, soon to be your next supervisor. Can I say that? Okay. Okay. The question was, do I want to talk a little bit about what's going on with Hunter Biden and impeachment? I guess the short answer is I didn't know that Hunter Biden was eligible to be impeached. You know, I don't know what to say about that. You know, Hunter Biden has problems. There's no question about that, and he has for a long time. If he did anything that was outside the law, he should be prosecuted and held responsible for that. I think Joe Biden, our president, is like any one of us who's a parent. You know, you love your kids through thick and thin, and I'm sad that he has to that Hunter has the problems that he has, and I'm sad that it impacts the family. As far as the impeachment stuff, you know, go figure. They're going to impeach Joe Biden for. I don't think there's any there, but I don't think that stops him. You know, I mean, look at Benghazi and Hillary Clinton. That the amount of taxpayer dollars and time we spent trying to discredit her. And she wasn't president; she was just running for president. And by the way, she showed up and she sat for the 11 hours straight questioning and answered all the questions. Yes.
Well, thank you for being here. Appreciate it. And also, thank you for introducing the tax relief bill. Do you think there's any chance it will pass before October 15th?
Before when?
October 15th.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that it's going to pass, to be honest with you. You know, it is a heavy lift. It's expensive. And with this crew that's running things right now, I don't know. I think that, and there are a lot more disaster than when we started this. So does it help or does it hurt? I'm not quite sure. Now, on my bill that passed the House and was over in the Senate, I had strong bipartisan support. Bill Cassidy from Louisiana was my Republican senator. He was my main proponent over in the Senate, and we still couldn't get it through Mitch McConnell. And it would have been a lot cheaper to do it. But I can tell you this. I can tell you that there are more people, more members of Congress on both sides, the House and the Senate, who are for this today than there was before Maui and before whatever hurricane or tornado or whatever the next disaster is. So the momentum builds, and it is a strong bipartisan effort. Doug LaMalfa, Republican congressman from up in the Butte County area, he suffered a lot of loss in his district. He's the lead author on my bill because the Republicans control the House this time, and he's working it. He's working it, quite honestly, harder than any Republican I've ever worked with on an issue. So he's talked to every Republican on the Ways and Means Committee. He's talked to Speaker McCarthy, and he is pushing it. I'm doing the same on our side. And if it doesn't happen, it's not because there wasn't every ounce of effort put into it. And I'm an optimist. I'm a half glass full guy. So yeah, we're going to get it, and we're going to get the help that the people need. Doug LaMalfa.
Hi. First of all, I'm very happy to move to your district from Southern California. So my question to you is, okay. Very happy to move into your district, move to here from Southern California. Yeah. My question to you is, you know, we have a loss, you know, me as I often have a difficult time to figure the laws, layers of laws. I wonder is when does Congress consider how to consolidate or make the law more simple, more comprehensive?
That's a good question. Question is, there's a lot of laws on the books. Is there any way to consolidate those? And the answer is yes. And there is effort to do that on an ongoing basis. Some of it is administratively, and this is at every level. This is county level, state level, and federal level. But I don't want to be to try and be a clown. But the fact of the matter is, it usually takes another law to do that. So, if a law is on the books, it generally takes another law to take it off the books. But the answer is yes. And sometimes they get it right, sometimes they don't. But there needs to be, and there's probably there's probably a bigger issue than just expunging old laws, new laws. California just expunged some law that none of us would have even guessed it was still on the books, but it was, and it wasn't impacting anybody, but it was there, and it was an egregious issue. I don't remember exactly what it was, but they just expunged that. But I think the bigger issue is more oversight. And I think if we spent more time doing oversight than legislation, we would be better off. And it's not just getting rid of laws, but it's making sure the laws we have are working. If they aren't working, either get rid of them or fix them. I think that would be time and money well spent. I'm not calling the questions. The two young ladies with the microphone you've got to get their attention.
Hi, Mike.
Hi.
I'm happy to say that when Meg and I, my wife, lived in Fort Bragg, you represented us there. And we're happy to have you represent us again.
Thank you.
My question is, in your 20 or so years in Congress, have you seen a more divisive House of Representatives in those years?
Well, thank you. I'm glad you're my constituent again. I'm honored to represent you. And the short answer is no. But if you remember, when I first went to Congress from the state Senate, I couldn't believe it was as dysfunctional and divided as it was at the time. I just couldn't believe it. And I have a reputation of working across party lines to get things done. My core belief is, when you elect me to go to Washington, it's because you want me to get things done. And I'm going to work with whomever I can work with to make sure that happens. And my bipartisan chops are well established. I'm every year when they do who's the most bipartisan person, I'm always the first or second most bipartisan member of Congress from California. And I've always been either 30, 31, or 32 across the country. I think it's important. And I did that when I got to Congress. One of the people that I worked with and a lot was a guy named Don Young from Alaska. We had fishing interests in common, and from Fort Bragg, you can certainly understand that. And Don and I worked a lot together, and it's not like that anymore. Things are very, very divisive. And in all fairness, we have people on our side of the aisle who are way too to the left. There are people on both sides, if they were to take another step to the right or another step to the left, they'd fall off the edge. And that's not where things get done. So I wish I could fix it. There's a number of things I believe that contribute to it. I think that I think that the internet, I think that all of the talking head political shows all contribute to that. The idea that the redistricting contributes to that, where you have states that redistrict their congressional districts, so they push all the Republicans out or push all the Democrats out. I think that's a factor. The fact that it used to be, someone would get elected to Congress, they'd go to Congress. They'd come home 2-3 times a year. You can't do that anymore for a number of reasons, but I think that's contributed to a lot of it. You know, if you're family friends with somebody and, you know, your kids play Little League and, you know, your wives or your husbands, you know, go to the Tuesday night fights or the ice cream social together, you know, it's hard to be mean to one another, but that stuff is all gone. And there's people now that they care more about getting a like on their Facebook or a contribution in the mail because they've said something outrageous. And I think it's a real distraction. They heard you coming.
Am I on? Oh,
Yes.
okay. Congressman, thank you for your service and excuse me for reading this question. I was privileged to meet with you in Washington about 10 years ago. At that time, I was a lonely voice advocating for more regulation of ammunition on the premise that with more than 300 million guns in private hands, addressing gun violence through gun regulation only was a hopeless cause, kind of like trying to reduce drug abuse by regulating needles. Since then, tens of millions of guns have been added to the American arsenal and gun deaths continue to rise. In 2019, California became the first state to place strict restrictions on ammunition purchases. Thanks to Dobbs, I am optimistic that Democrats will recapture the House in 2024. If that happens, will you consider making restrictions on ammunition a priority in the legislative fight against gun violence?
Thank you for the question. Thanks for your work on gun violence. I think that I'm pragmatic. And I think that's real tough in Washington to be able to do that. We do have restrictions in California. It hasn't, and for all full disclosure, I think people know I'm a gun owner and I hunt and I shoot sporting clays right down the road here. It hasn't stopped me from purchasing ammunition. One thing it has done is it's caused more division amongst the people that we need to bring on board if we're going to get firearms, proper gun violence prevention legislation. It's another hassle for responsible, law-abiding gun owners, and that's always been a problem in convincing those people. And those are the ones we need. We don't need to convince liberal Democrats. We need to convince people in the middle who are concerned about that. But aside from all that, I think it's just a real heavy lift in the Congress. Even if we do come back and take that, it is not a priority issue, even with Democrats in regard to gun violence prevention. There are other things that have higher standing and are believed to be better as far as reducing gun violence prevention. And again, I point to my legislation on background checks, expanding background checks. 92% of the American people support it, and the Republicans won't allow it to come to the floor for a vote. And in the last two Congresses, when I passed that with a bipartisan vote, we couldn't bring it up for a vote in the Senate because, Jen, you know the drill in the Senate. We have a majority in the Senate, but it's like razor thin. But they have that cloture rule. So in the United States Senate, in order to bring a bill up for a vote, a bill that would take 51 votes to pass, before you can even bring it up for a vote, you have to have 60 votes to bring it up for a vote. And they won't bring up background checks. So the thought of them bringing up ammunition, not going to happen.
Well, Mike,
Keep the fight going.
I'm 86 years old, and my stamina, mental acuity, all these things are going, seem like by the day. Feinstein and McConnell and Chuck Grassley, and I don't know who all's in the House, are aging out. America's average age is getting younger. We have a presidential term limits. Is there a chance we'll ever see it in Congress? Age limits in Congress.
Well, I think that, it's like term limits. I think we have those built in. For me, it's every 2 years. If you think I'm too old or you think that my term needs to be ended, you go to the polls and do that. I think the Feinstein issue has brought a lot of attention to this, and I think it's terribly sad because Dianne Feinstein will always be a heroine in my eyes. She's done a fantastic job. She's, from her days in San Francisco to her days in Congress, she and I have done a lot of federal legislation together. She's terrific. And sadly, I think she's going to be remembered more for being incapacitated in office. I don't think when she ran for re-election, she thought that that was going to be the case. It just, as you say, it catches up with you sometimes. And in her case, she can't resign. If she were to resign, McConnell has already said, the Republicans have already said, they will not allow another Democrat to be seated on the Judiciary Committee. So if she were to resign, we wouldn't have any more judges appointed for starters. So she needs to hang in there for the rest of this term. She's not running for re-election. There will be a younger U.S. senator next year in representing California. As far as McConnell, there's a bunch of reasons I'd like McConnell gone, and I had those reasons before he had his speech problem. Chuck Grassley, I don't know what his physical condition is. I know that he likes to, in town hall meetings, do push-ups. So I guess he's a good push-up guy. But and as far as anybody else, I think there's people that are. I have a colleague, sadly, who's much younger than I am. She's in her young 50s, and she was just diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. And she's having, and we saw it. She sits over in the area where I usually sit on the floor, and you can see it every day. The impact it's having on her. So it's not an age thing. It's it's a healthcare issue with her. And then I'll throw in, it's been in the news a lot. Both Mick Jagger and Willie Nelson are going on tour, and they're in their high 80s.
Following up on the Feinstein, you serve with three members. You serve with three members of the House in California that are running for her seat, and you're obviously quite a thoughtful person and want to get things done. So, which one of those three, or two of those three, would you think would be most capable of working with you to accomplish these goals?
Well, I've served with Barbara Lee and Adam Schiff, both in the state legislature and in the Congress of the United States of America. I've worked well with both of them for that entire time. They're both devoted and devoted members, and they care a great deal about our state and our country. Katie Porter, she's relatively new, so I haven't worked much with her. I'm supporting Adam Schiff, and I'm supporting Adam Schiff for a couple of reasons. One, to your point, he's a young man. We need someone in the Senate who hits the ground running, knows what they're doing, well respected, can work with members in both houses, and who's going to be there for a long time. Congress, and probably more so the Senate, but Congress is an institution based on seniority, and you don't just bop in and get it going on right away. So Adam, I think, is the one who will not only be able to get things done, very capable, highly respected, but he'll be there long enough where he can establish that seniority to make sure California is taken care of.
Hi, a lot of people in this community have lost their home insurance, and these insurance companies are leaving the state. Is there anything going on about that?
I just met with a group. I was one of the speakers over at Buena Vista Winery for a group of advocates for policyholders. They came about after the Oakland Hills fire, and because consumers, policyholders, were being taken advantage of by the insurance companies, and that's what brought rise to this group. Before they were even a year old, the district that I represented in the state Senate, we had one of the most horrific fires at that time in the history of California. That was the Fountain Fire up in Shasta County. And they grew, this advocacy group grew because of that, because again, policyholders were disadvantaged. It's not new. And insurance companies are in the business. It's not a benevolent organization. They're not here to make sure you're taken care of. They're there, they make money. And I don't want to disparage, the industry, because, the people that live down the street that we buy our insurance from, they want to work to serve you. But the companies are there to make money. So any way they can reduce their liability, they're going to do that. And again, it's not just now, it's been going on for a long time. I know that Jan and I got a notice, it's been about, it's been 25 years ago, because we owned with two people in my office, those two couples, and Jan and I owned a house up in Siskiyou County, and our responsibility was the insurance. And we got a cancellation. We sold the house the year I got elected to Congress, and we got a notice where they canceled the insurance on the Siskiyou house and our house in St. Helena. And when I finally got through to the company, they said, well, your house in St. Helena was built in 1890. It's a fire hazard. The wires are old and stuff. They didn't have wires in 1890. We replaced those gas lines a long time ago. And plus, this house has been all redone from everything, pipes and wires. And they said, oh, okay, well, that's fine. We'll insure that. I said, well, how about the Siskiyou house? They said, no, it's in, zone 1667-15A or whatever. And it's a fire hazard. And it takes too long for the fire folks to respond. So we have to cancel that. I said, well, it's in a little development, kind of like this on a golf course. And we are literally catty corner from the fire department. And they said, okay, well, we'll insure that house. So this stuff has been going on sometimes in a very arbitrary way, like every house built in 1890, we're not going to insure. Every house in Siskiyou County, we're not going to insure. And then the burden of proof falls on the policyholder to come back. So it's a little different situation now because of these the disasters that we've been having, and the fact where we started today, the impact that climate change has in regard to these disasters. They're working really hard to get out from underneath this liability. So I've looked at different things at a federal level, and as you probably know, insurance stuff is state, not federal, but I've been looking at ways to try and influence it. Maybe some federal legislation that says if you're gonna sell car insurance, you have to sell homeowners insurance. You can't just you can't cherry pick and get the good stuff. And what the insurance companies always say is, well, the way to deal with this is to harden properties so they're not in a fire hazard. Well, we've been doing that. We spent a ton of money from the infrastructure bill and from the Inflation Reduction Act, sending it back to states so they can do all this hardening and forest management. We spent money to the U.S. Forest Service to do better forest management. I've got legislation that would provide tax incentives for people to do disaster-related improvements. Like if the state of California gives you a $300 rebate if you anchor your hot water heater, you shouldn't be taxed on that. So we've been doing a lot. Now the task is making sure the insurance companies pay attention to the work that the policyholders are doing. So if you come in and you harden your property, you do the clearing, you know, change the roof, whatever you're doing, and then the insurance company says, no, we're just going to not going to cover anybody in Oakmont, no matter what you do. That's what we're trying to push on right now, to get them to recognize the investment and the improvement that homeowners are making.
I skipped my church to come to listen to you.
You need to put the microphone closer. There you go.
Okay. I feel saddened to watch what's going on in San Francisco because all the business are moving out because of organized crime and the law enforcement. Their hands are tied. Democratic Party is known to be weak on crime control. So what are you going to do to prevent the San Francisco going down to the drain, like it can come to Santa Rosa as well?
Okay, thank you. Make no mistake about it. I'm anti-crime. Retail crime or any other. San Francisco's had a rough go. And these organized groups that are going in and vandalizing and robbing stores has had a real serious impact. And I'm co-author of legislation in Washington that is designed to go after the folks that are organizing this. These aren't a bunch of random kids that are saying, hey, let's go into Tiffany's and, you know, and steal a necklace. This is an organized group. And we're told that law enforcement needs new tools to be able to go after them and to be able to better crack down on the people who are conspiring to do these crimes. That's the #1 issue for the retail lobbying group at the federal and the state level. So we're working on that.
Thanks for you coming and visiting Oakmont. In Oakmont, we tend to be a little bit out on an island and isolated from maybe the rest of the world. But what I read is that a lot of people are either at the low end of the income scale or the upper end, and that the middle is disappearing, and that the kind of people who are on the breadline are people who are holding down good jobs but can't make ends meet. My wife volunteers at a food bank, and we have frontline knowledge. And I think that leads to a couple of things. One is such people are going to get disillusioned with incumbents who they see as part of the problem and fall prey to populists. And also in California, you know, housing seems to be a major factor in making ends meet. And I just wonder what sort of trends you see as eventually reversing this kind of situation.
Well, I think that's an excellent point, and I don't think that's lost on anybody on my side of the aisle. Matter of fact, that was the main plank in President Biden's efforts in all of the legislation that I talked about, starting with what became the Inflation Reduction Act, but if you recall, started out as the Build Back Better legislation. And the whole effort was to try and build back from the center out to make sure that the middle class grew, and that gave room for the folks at the bottom to move up. If you look at our tax policy, it's all focused in that direction. Probably the most effective tax policy that's ever been passed in my lifetime, if you're looking at outcomes, was the bill that we passed out of my committee, my subcommittee, actually, the tax subcommittee on Ways and Means, passed to the floor, passed. It became a 1-year program in the Inflation Reduction Act, and that was the child tax credit legislation that we passed. And think about this. We passed that bill that we could only get it for a year. It cut the child poverty rate in half. Now, in any other time in our lifetime, if any president running for re-election got up to the microphone and said, I signed a bill that cut the child poverty rate in half, they would be elected in a landslide. If nothing else ever happened, that in itself is monumental. And sadly, it's only a year. We need to extend it to make it permanent, as many of the programs that we passed. But I think it is emblematic of where Democrats want to go, and that is to grow the middle class, and that's a priority of mine. As far as housing, there's a million constraints in regard to housing. Everything from the disruption in supply chain to tariffs. You know that the other guy, the last guy, he did that tariff on nails, and the cost that has brought to the cost of housing is just off the charts. So we've got land use issues, we've got supply chain issues that we're still trying to catch up on. I think housing is a very important part of fixing the issues that you raised. I did legislation a couple of years ago that provided tax incentive for people to build affordable housing. And I knew that it was successful. They built, I think, 850 units in Napa. They built about the same number in Santa Rosa. Journey's End, the new development where that came about because of that legislation. That was the push that they needed to be able to do that program. And then when we were redistricted, and I'd always represented all of Lake County, but in the last redistricting, they cut it in half. When they put all of Lake County back in our district, I was up on the north end of the lake in Clear Lake, and they had built 1,600 units because of that legislation. And it was a pretty straightforward deal. It said, in far as affordable housing, we're going to do $100 million in tax credits for areas that were part of disaster areas. And because of the fire and all the houses we lost, we qualified for that. And it's really made a difference. So we need to keep doing things like that. Now, I mentioned that I was at an event in Napa last night in American Canyon, and they're building over 1,000 units. And like 800 and some of those are coming about because of the low income affordable housing tax credit that I did. We just need to keep doing that. We need to keep figuring out how to provide housing. And you see local governments are doing a lot. They're doing ADUs. They're adjusting setbacks on property lines so you can do second units. There's a big effort in some places to be able to partition off. You have a house, you're an empty nester, you're by yourself, and you've got 3,000 square feet, and you need about 1,000. There's grants at in some local levels where they're able to partition off. You stay in your 1,000 square feet, rent out the other 2,000. So you're seeing a lot of effort. I just think it takes time.
Mike, thank you again for being here. So my Republican friends seem to complain that I'm a great fan, by the way, of Bidenomics, but they complain that Bidenomics has it's all about ballooning the deficit, it's inflation, it's socialism, it's big government, and yet they're happy to vote for more subsidies for big business and more subsidies for big agriculture. What I'm curious to know, how do you work with that? How do you counter those kinds of slogans when you're working with other Republicans on the other side.
If my mother was still alive, she'd tell you to tell them they're full of prunes. Well, the statistics are pretty clear. If you look at the growth in our debt, it's come about more in the Trump and the Bush presidencies than in the Obama and the Biden presidencies. And the difference is in the Obama and the Biden administrations, any debt that we've incurred has been because of some sort of compelling natural problem that we have, a crash in the market that Obama inherited from the Bush administration, the mishandling of COVID that Biden inherited from the Trump administration. So I think we've done quite well. What we haven't done in either in my time in this Biden administration, we haven't given outrageous tax cuts to the wealthiest 1% of the American people and not paid for it. That's the biggest expense that we've incurred in the last 3 or 4 administrations. So, and I get a kick out of people saying, well, the Inflation Reduction Act was inflationary. It's caused all these problems. And as all of us know from our econ classes that we took, when you pay for something, it's not inflationary. And the Inflation Reduction Act was paid for. So to try and hang the inflation stuff on that is pretty outrageous.
Mike, I know you have to leave in 5 minutes, so I'm going to give the last question here to Juanita.
Okay, I'm hearing noises about the idea of increasing the number of representatives so that we have more a historical ratio of representative to constituent. I just wondered what you thought about that and what the chances are of it moving forward.
Well, there are a number of discussions going on in regard to how we can change things that are outlined in the Constitution. And at present time, I'd say they're probably slim to none, and Slim's already left town. I don't think we're going to open the Constitution to deal with these issues. I'm not saying that I don't think we should. I think there's a number of things. I think we should. I think on gun violence, I think there's some constitutional changes that need to be made, and whether or not we need more representatives to deal with the growth of the population is something that should certainly be considered in that regard. It's not going to happen in this political climate.
We want to thank Mike for coming out again. Mike,
Thank you.
he's a honorary symposium alumni, should I say, alumnus. We hope to see you again next year. It's always great to have our representative come to us so we can ask questions and get a better idea of what is really going on. And we thank you, Mike, for representing us and for coming to Sunday Symposium.
Thank you all very, very much.